The scanner beeped 3 times, then fell silent. Captain Kestrel, Raven, Thorne stepped back from the biometric station at Ramstein Air Base, watching the red light blink with the patience of someone who'd seen this dance before. The tech sergeant behind the glass partition, barely old enough to shave, squinted at his screen with the expression of a man trying to solve quantum physics with crayons. "Ma'am, your clearance isn't showing up in the system," he said, voice cracking slightly. Behind him, 3 other airmen had gathered, drawn by the unusual sight of the scanner's rejection protocol. "Could you try again?" Raven rolled up her flight suit sleeve, revealing the intricate tattoo that spiraled from her wrist to her elbow. At first glance, it looked like decorative Celtic knotwork, the kind of ink you'd get on shore leave after too many drinks and bad decisions. The airmen exchanged glances, barely suppressing smirks. Here was another pilot trying to look tough with some trendy body art. "Run it again," she said quietly, pressing her forearm against the scanner's blue light. The machine hummed, its laser tracing the apparent tattoo's complex patterns. What the young airman didn't know, what nobody on this base knew, was that those weren't decorative swirls. Hidden within the Celtic design were quantum-encrypted biometric markers, each line containing terabytes of classified data that could only be read by 3 scanners in the entire world. One was in the Pentagon, one was in a bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain, and one was right here. The scanner's hum shifted to a higher pitch. The red light flickered, then turned amber. In the reflection of the bulletproof glass, Raven watched the tech sergeant's expression change from bored irritation to confusion, then to something approaching fear. His screen had gone black except for a single line of text scrolling across the top. Eclipse Protocol ACTIVATED. "Sir, I mean, ma'am, I need to call my supervisor," he stammered, reaching for his phone. "No," Raven said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made colonels pause mid-sentence. "You need to call the base commander, now." The amber light turned green, and somewhere deep in the administrative complex, alarms began to sound. Not the general quarters klaxon everyone knew, but a different tone entirely, one that meant the impossible had just walked through their front door. As blast doors began sealing throughout the facility, Raven Thorne smiled for the first time in 18 months. The joke, as it turned out, was on everyone else. The last time Eclipse Protocol had been activated, half of Eastern Europe had disappeared from satellite feeds for 6 hours. The brass had sworn it would never happen again. But standing in the fluorescent glare of a routine security checkpoint, watching 20-year-old airmen realize they were suddenly way out of their depth, Raven knew that some promises were meant to be broken. Especially when the alternative was watching the world burn. Colonel Marcus Webb had been enjoying his first quiet morning in 3 weeks when his secure phone rang with the tone that meant his day was about to become exponentially worse. He'd been sipping coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of motor oil, reading intelligence reports that contained more speculation than intelligence, and seriously considering whether a transfer to Alaska might improve his quality of life. The Eclipse tone changed all that. "Sir, we have a Protocol 7 activation at the main gate," came the voice of Major Sarah Kim, his operations officer. In the background, he could hear the controlled chaos of a command center suddenly shifting into high gear. "Biometric match confirms Kestrel Thorne, call sign Raven. She's requesting immediate access to Hangar 18. Webb set down his coffee cup with the careful precision of a man trying not to break things when his world had just tilted sideways. Hangar 18 had been sealed since 2019. The aircraft inside didn't officially exist, and the pilot qualified to fly it had been declared dead after a mission that never happened. "Tell me she's not really standing at our front gate," Webb said, already knowing the answer. "Sir, she's very much here, and sir, the tattoo authenticated all 7 layers." Webb closed his eyes. 7 layers meant this wasn't some clerical error or elaborate con game. 7 layers meant that someone with clearance so far above his pay grade that he needed a telescope to see it had decided his nice, quiet air base was about to become the center of something he probably didn't want to know about. How long since the scanners went active? 4 minutes, sir. Base lockdown is in effect. All personnel are confined to their current locations until we get the all clear. Through his office window, Webb could see airmen standing around looking confused as blast doors sealed across the facility. His phone was already lighting up with calls from squadron commanders demanding to know why their people couldn't get to the commissary. In about 10 minutes, he'd start getting calls from generals demanding to know why Ramstein had suddenly gone dark. Sir, Kim's voice carried that particular tone that meant she was about to make his day even worse. There's something else. She's not alone. Webb felt his stomach drop. Explain. 2 civilian contractors with her, both carrying diplomatic immunity credentials. And sir, one of them has a briefcase with a radiation signature. The coffee cup slipped from Webb's nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor in a spray of ceramic and rapidly cooling caffeine. A briefcase with a radiation signature meant nuclear materials. Nuclear materials meant weapons, and weapons in the hands of people with Eclipse clearance meant someone had decided that subtle diplomacy had outlived its usefulness. Get me a direct line to the Pentagon, Webb said, reaching for his jacket, and prep my staff car. If Raven Thorn is here, then something very bad is about to happen, and we're apparently going to be right in the middle of it. As he headed for the door, Webb tried to remember everything he'd heard about Kestrel Thorn. The stories were contradictory, fragmented, and almost certainly classified beyond his clearance level. But the one consistent thread was simple. When Raven showed up, people died. The question was whether those people would be the enemy or everyone else. The staff car's engine hummed with the quiet efficiency of German engineering as Colonel Webb approached the main gate, his mind racing through protocols he'd hoped never to use. Through the windshield, he could see the small crowd that had gathered around the security checkpoint, airmen standing at careful attention, trying to look professional while obviously fighting the urge to gawk. And there, in the center of it all, stood a woman who looked nothing like the ghost stories. Raven Thorn was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'6" in her flight boots, with the kind of compact build that spoke of too many hours in cockpits and not enough time for regular meals. Her hair was regulation short, dark brown with premature silver threading through it like battle scars. But it was her eyes that made Webb understand why grown men whispered her name in ready rooms. They were the color of winter sky, and they held the kind of stillness that came from seeing too much and forgetting too little. The 2 civilians flanking her were studies in contrast. The man was tall, pale, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Webb's monthly salary. He held himself with the careful posture of someone accustomed to bodyguards and bulletproof cars. The briefcase chained to his wrist gleamed silver in the afternoon sun. The woman beside him was harder to read. Asian features, maybe 40, dressed in contractor casual, jeans, jacket, hiking boots that had actually seen hiking. But she moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent serious time learning how to hurt people efficiently, and her eyes swept the base perimeter with the systematic attention of a professional. Colonel Webb, Raven said as he approached, her voice carrying the flat precision of someone who'd spent years communicating over radio static. Thank you for responding quickly. Captain Thorn. He made the title a question, nodding that she wore no visible rank. I have to admit, your arrival has raised some questions. She smiled, and it was like watching ice crack. I imagine it has. This is Dr. Andreas Mueller. She nodded toward the man with the briefcase. And Commander Lisa Park, Office of Naval Intelligence. We need immediate access to Hangar 18 and a secure communications link to SDRATCOM. Webb felt his mouth go dry. Strategic command meant nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons meant that whatever was in that briefcase wasn't just radioactive. It was probably enough to level city blocks. Captain, with respect, Hangar 18 has been sealed for 6 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Raven interrupted. I know, I'm the one who sealed it. Behind her, Commander Park was scanning the base perimeter with the methodical attention of someone mapping firing positions. Dr. Mueller checked his watch, an expensive piece that probably did more than tell time, and frowned. Colonel, Park said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from briefing admirals, we have approximately 18 hours before a very bad situation becomes catastrophic. The asset in Hangar 18 is the only thing that can reach the target zone in time. What target zone? Webb asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Raven and Park exchanged a look that contained entire conversations. When Raven spoke again, her voice was quieter, but somehow more intense. Sir, 3 days ago, a North Korean submarine went dark in the Bering Sea. Yesterday, we detected a radiation signature moving south along the Pacific coast. As of 6 hours ago, that signature is approximately 40 nautical miles off the coast of California. The pieces clicked together in Webb's mind with the horrible clarity of a nightmare becoming real. Submarine, radiation, nuclear materials in a briefcase. They're going to detonate, he said. Not if we stop them first, Raven replied, already turning toward Hangar 18. But that means getting back in the cockpit of an aircraft that officially doesn't exist to fly a mission that will never appear in any records. As they walked across the tarmac, Webb noticed something else about Captain Thorne. Despite everything, the impossible clearance, the mysterious aircraft, the nuclear crisis, she looked almost relieved, like she'd been waiting 6 years for this moment. The question was whether the rest of them would survive whatever came next. Hangar 18 squatted on the far edge of Ramstein like a concrete monument to secrets, its blast doors sealed with warnings in 3 languages and locks that required presidential authorization to open. As their small convoy approached, Webb noticed the subtle details that marked this building as different from the others. The reinforced construction, the lack of windows, the way other personnel unconsciously avoided walking too close. Commander Park produced a device that looked like a smartphone crossed with a Geiger counter, holding it against the primary lock mechanism. Numbers scrolled across its screen in rapid succession, each one apparently corresponding to some invisible digital handshake between her device and the hangar's security system. Interesting, she murmured, studying the readout. Someone's been maintaining the internal systems. Atmospheric controls are active, power grid is nominal, even the climate control is running. Dr. Mueller shifted nervously, the briefcase at his wrist catching the afternoon light. How long has this facility been sealed? Officially, Webb replied, since the Aurora program was terminated in 2019. Raven made a sound that might have been laughter. Officially, that's a good one. The locks disengaged with a series of mechanical clicks that sounded unnaturally loud in the afternoon quiet. As the blast doors began to retract, Webb caught his first glimpse of what lay beyond. Darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light. Then the automatic illumination kicked in. The aircraft inside Hangar 18 defied easy description. It was roughly the size of an F-22 Raptor, but where the Raptor was all angles and aggression, this machine seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen in flight. Its skin was matte black, so dark it seemed to absorb the hangar lights rather than reflect them. No visible weapons pylons, no obvious engine intakes, no markings or identification numbers. Jesus, Webb breathed. Close, Raven said, running her hand along the aircraft's flank with the familiarity of long association. But we called her Nephilim. Park was circling the aircraft, her device chirping softly as it detected whatever exotic materials comprised the machine's construction. Electromagnetic signature is barely registering. Radar cross-section must be effectively 0. Lower than 0, Raven corrected, pressing her palm against a section of the aircraft's hull. Hidden panels slid open with hydraulic precision, revealing a cockpit that looked more like the bridge of a starship than anything that belonged in Earth's atmosphere. The skin doesn't just scatter radar, it actively absorbs and redirects electromagnetic energy, makes her effectively invisible to everything from ground-based radar to satellite surveillance. Dr. Mueller was staring at the machine with the expression of a man trying to reconcile his understanding of physics with what his eyes were telling him. The propulsion system is classified beyond your clearance level, Raven interrupted. But I can tell you it'll push her to Mach 4.8 in level flight, and she can pull 47 GS without the pilot blacking out. Webb felt his worldview shifting like tectonic plates. 47 GS would turn a human being into paste. No known aircraft could sustain those forces, let alone allow a pilot to survive them. How, he asked. Raven was already climbing into the cockpit, her movements showing the unconscious precision of someone who'd made this climb hundreds of times before. Inertial dampening field creates a localized bubble where normal physics take a coffee break. As she settled into the pilot's seat, Webb noticed something else. The tattoo on her arm was glowing. Not obviously, just a faint luminescence that became visible now that she was inside the aircraft. The Celtic pattern seemed to pulse in rhythm with lights that were awakening throughout the cockpit, as if her biological signature was somehow interfacing directly with the machine's systems. "My God," Dr. Mueller whispered, "you're quantum linked to the aircraft." Raven's smile was sharp as winter wind. "The tattoo isn't just identification, Doctor. It's a neural interface. Makes me and Nephilim a single organism when we're airborne." Systems throughout the hangar were coming online, support equipment emerging from hidden compartments, fuel lines extending from the walls like technological umbilicals. The aircraft itself seemed to be awakening, internal lights casting an ethereal glow through translucent panels. "How long until you can launch?" Park asked, checking her watch again. 20 minutes for full systems check and pre-flight," Raven replied, her fingers dancing over controls that responded to her touch before she even made contact. "But that's not the real question." "What is?" Webb asked. Raven looked up from the cockpit, and for a moment the mask of professional competence slipped. What Webb saw underneath was exhaustion, loss, and something that might have been fear. "The real question, Colonel, is whether I can remember how to kill without becoming a monster again." The pre-flight checklist for Nephilim bore no resemblance to anything in Webb's experience. Where conventional aircraft had dozens of mechanical systems requiring individual verification, this machine seemed to diagnose itself through some form of technological telepathy. Raven's hands moved over the controls with unconscious precision, but Webb noticed that her eyes never actually looked at the instruments, as if she was reading the aircraft's status directly from some internal source. "Quantum core stable," she announced, though Webb couldn't see any readout that would convey that information. "Gravitational field generators online. Stealth envelope nominal." Dr. Mueller had connected his briefcase to a port that emerged from the aircraft's hull, apparently uploading whatever classified materials he'd carried across an ocean. "Target coordinates confirmed," he said. "The submarine is maintaining course and speed towards San Francisco Bay. Current projection has them reaching detonation range in 14 hours." Commander Park was coordinating with someone over an encrypted satellite link, her voice carrying the clipped urgency of a crisis spinning toward catastrophe. "STRATCOM confirms no friendly assets in the target zone. You're authorized to engage with extreme prejudice." "Copy that," Raven replied, though something in her tone suggested the authorization was more formality than permission. Her fingers found controls that caused sections of the aircraft's hull to reconfigure themselves, revealing weapon bays that had been invisible moments before. Internal magazines show 4 Prometheus missiles, 2 Hellfire variants, and a full load of 30mm rounds. Webb had never heard of Prometheus missiles, but given the day's revelations, he suspected they represented another technological advancement that officially didn't exist. What's the effective range? Prometheus, 600 nautical miles with terminal guidance accurate to within 3 feet. Raven's voice carried the flat precision of someone reciting technical specifications she'd memorized long ago. They're designed specifically for hardened underwater targets. The implications hit Webb like a physical blow. 600 miles meant she could engage the submarine from well outside any defensive perimeter. Terminal guidance accurate to 3 feet meant she could put a warhead through a specific compartment of a submerged vessel. This wasn't just an aircraft, it was a precision assassination weapon. "How many people are on that submarine?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air for several heartbeats before Park answered. Standard North Korean diesel-electric submarine carries a crew of approximately 60. 60 people. 60 human beings who'd probably joined their navy believing they were serving their country, now condemned to death by the megalomaniacal ambitions of leaders who would never face the consequences of their decisions. Webb had spent 30 years in the military, had seen combat in 3 different conflicts, but something about the clinical precision of this mission left him feeling hollow. Raven seemed to sense his thoughts. "Colonel, those 60 people are carrying enough nuclear material to irradiate half the Pacific coastline. The warhead they're transporting isn't designed for military targets. It's specifically engineered to maximize civilian casualties and long-term environmental damage." Her voice carried no emotion, but Webb caught the slight tremor in her hands as she made final adjustments to the targeting system. Whatever psychological toll this mission would exact, she was already paying it. "Besides," she continued, "this won't be the first time I've had to choose between saving strangers and saving everyone else." The statement carried the weight of personal history, and Webb found himself wondering what operations had forged this woman into someone who could speak so matter-of-factly about killing 60 people to save millions. "Nephilim is ready for launch," Raven announced. "All systems green, quantum core at full power. Estimated flight time to target 47 minutes. Park closed her satellite link and approached the cockpit. "Captain, you should know. Intelligence suggests this isn't an isolated incident. We've detected similar radiation signatures near Seattle and Los Angeles. If the submarine you're targeting successfully detonates, it could trigger a coordinated attack." Raven's expression hardened. "How many?" "Potentially 7 cities, West Coast. Combined casualty estimates in the millions." Webb felt the weight of the moment settling around them like a physical presence. One woman, one impossible aircraft, standing between civilization and catastrophe. The mathematics were simple, but the human cost was staggering. "Any questions?" Park asked. Raven smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Just one. After I complete the mission, am I still officially dead?" The question caught everyone off guard. Park and Mueller exchanged glances before Park answered carefully. "That depends on how clean the operation goes." "Then I guess I'd better not screw this up," Raven said, initiating the final launch sequence. "Because I'm getting tired of being a ghost." The hangar's massive doors began to retract, revealing a runway that stretched toward a horizon painted in shades of approaching dusk. As Nephilim's exotic engines came online with a sound like reality tearing at the seams, Webb realized he was witnessing something that would never appear in any official record. But he suspected he'd remember it for the rest of his life. The launch of Nephilim defied every principle of aerodynamics Webb thought he understood. There was no thunderous roar of conventional jet engines, no billowing clouds of exhaust, no gradual acceleration down the runway. Instead, the aircraft simply lifted straight up with the serene grace of something that had decided gravity was merely a suggestion. From the hangar's observation deck, Webb watched as Raven took the impossible machine through maneuvers that should have torn both aircraft and pilot apart. vertical climbs that transition to horizontal flight without any apparent change in orientation, turns so sharp they seem to violate conservation of momentum, acceleration that compressed time itself into something malleable. Jesus Christ, he breathed, watching Nephilim climb toward 30,000 feet in what his stopwatch claimed was 14 seconds. Commander Park was tracking the aircraft on instruments that displayed information in formats Webb had never seen. "She's maintaining perfect stealth profile," Park reported. "Radar signature is registering as a small bird. Electromagnetic emissions are below background noise. If I didn't know where to look, I couldn't find her." Dr. Mueller had opened another case, this one containing communication equipment that apparently operated on principles more advanced than anything Webb's intelligence briefings had mentioned. Direct quantum link established with the aircraft. All telemetry is coming through clearly. Through the speakers, Raven's voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who'd found her element 30,000 feet above the problems of terrestrial existence. "Nephilim to control, climbing through flight level 450, course 270. Estimated time to target zone 42 minutes. Webb did quick mental arithmetic and felt his understanding of physics crumble a little more. Flight level 450 meant 45,000 feet. She'd climbed more than 8 miles in less than 2 minutes. "Copy, Nephilim," Park responded. "Be advised, latest intelligence shows target has descended to periscope depth and is maintaining course toward San Francisco Bay. Current estimate has them reaching optimal detonation position in 13 hours 15 minutes. Understood, beginning long-range sensor sweep." On Mueller's displays, new information began appearing: sonar contacts, thermal signatures, electromagnetic anomalies scattered across hundreds of square miles of Pacific Ocean. But one signature blazed brighter than the others, a concentrated knot of radiation and metal that could only be their target. "Contact?" Raven's voice carried a subtle tension that hadn't been there before. "Bearing 268, range 430 nautical miles. Thermal signature consistent with nuclear reactor. Electromagnetic profile matches North Korean submarine class. I have solid target lock." Webb found himself holding his breath. 430 miles. She was about to engage an enemy she couldn't even see with the naked eye, using weapons that existed in the spaces between official reality and classified impossibility. "Nephilim, you are authorized to engage," Park said. "Execute at your discretion." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for hours, though Webb's watch insisted only seconds had passed. Somewhere over the Pacific, a woman who officially didn't exist was making the decision to end 60 lives in order to save millions. "Prometheus 1 away," came Raven's voice, flat and professional. "Time of flight 3 minutes 17 seconds. On Mueller's display, a new icon appeared, a small arrow racing across the digital representation of the Pacific at speeds that made conventional cruise missiles look like paper airplanes. Webb watched its progress with fascination and horror, knowing that each second brought them closer to a moment that would define the next chapter of global history. 30 seconds to impact, Raven reported. Target is maintaining course and speed. No evidence they've detected incoming ordnance. Webb realized he was gripping the observation deck railing hard enough to leave impressions in the metal. 60 people were about to die, probably without ever knowing what killed them. It was necessary, justifiable, and absolutely vital to the survival of millions of innocent civilians. That didn't make it feel any less like murder. 10 seconds to impact. Through the speakers, Webb could hear the subtle background noise of Nephilim's exotic systems, the quiet hum of technology that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. But underneath that, he caught something else, the sound of someone breathing very carefully, maintaining control through sheer force of will. Impact. Mueller's display flared white, then settled into a scattered pattern of debris and rapidly dissipating thermal signatures. Where the submarine had been, there was now only empty ocean and the fading traces of destruction. "Solid kill," Raven reported, her voice carrying no satisfaction, only the confirmation of a job completed. "Target destroyed. No survivors detected. Beginning sweep for additional threats." 60 people had just died in the space between one heartbeat and the next, their lives ended by a woman they'd never seen flying an aircraft their government couldn't have imagined. Webb found himself wondering about those submariners. Had they been young men dreaming of home, or hardened veterans serving a cause they believed in? Had they known what cargo they carried, or were they simply following orders without understanding the magnitude of their mission? "Outstanding work, Nephilim," Park said. "Return to base for debriefing." "Negative, Control. I'm detecting additional contacts. Looks like intelligence was right about this being coordinated." Webb's stomach dropped. Additional contacts meant more submarines, more nuclear weapons, more impossible decisions about who lived and who died. "How many?" Park asked. "3 more signatures, scattered along the coast. This is going to be a long night." The first additional contact appeared on Mueller's displays like a ghost materializing from digital static. A faint thermal signature lurking in the deep waters off Seattle, barely distinguishable from the background noise of ocean currents and marine life. But Raven's enhanced sensors, linked through her neural interface to systems that operated beyond conventional physics, painted a clearer picture. "Contact 2 is maintaining position approximately 60 nautical miles northwest of Seattle," she reported, her voice carrying the methodical calm of someone who'd settled into the rhythm of warfare. "Depth approximately 400 feet, minimal movement. They're waiting for something." Webb watched the tactical display update in real time, additional information flowing from Nephilim's sensors with each passing second. The submarine's profile was different from the first target, larger, with a more complex electromagnetic signature that suggested additional equipment beyond standard navigation and weapons systems. "Command vessel," Park concluded, studying the data. "They're coordinating the entire operation from there." Dr. Mueller was cross-referencing intelligence databases, his fingers dancing over controls that accessed information Webb probably wasn't cleared to see. If that's accurate, destroying the command vessel could disrupt communications with the remaining submarines, force them to either surface or abort their missions. "Or trigger them to detonate immediately," Raven pointed out. "Depends on whether they're operating under dead man switches or positive control protocols." The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Dead man switches meant the submarines would detonate automatically if they lost contact with command. Positive control meant they needed specific authorization to proceed. The difference between those two protocols could determine whether millions of people lived or died. "Best guess?" Park asked. "North Korea's submarine doctrine emphasizes central control," Mueller replied after consulting his databases. "Probability favors positive control protocols. If we can eliminate the command vessel, remaining submarines should abort and return to base." "Should," Webb repeated. "What's the confidence level on that assessment?" "Approximately 73%. Webb felt his mouth go dry. 73% meant better than even odds, but it also meant a 27% chance that destroying the command submarine would trigger the exact catastrophe they were trying to prevent. "Nephilim to Control," Raven's voice cut through their debate. "I'm detecting movement from Contact 2. They're ascending toward periscope depth. Looks like they're preparing to transmit." The implications hit Webb immediately. If the command submarine was moving to communication depth, it meant they were about to coordinate with the remaining vessels. Whatever window existed for preventing a synchronized attack was closing rapidly. "Time estimate until they reach transmission depth?" Park asked. 4 minutes, 30 seconds at current ascent rate." Park was already reaching for her satellite communicator, presumably to consult with whoever was coordinating this operation from Washington. But Webb realized they didn't have time for consultation, committee decisions, or risk assessments. 4 minutes meant Raven needed authorization now, or they'd lose the opportunity to prevent a coordinated nuclear attack on the American West Coast. Authorization granted, Webb said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Park lowered her communicator, Mueller stopped typing, and even Raven's voice carried a note of surprise when she responded. "Colonel, you don't have authority for." "I'm the senior officer on scene," Webb interrupted. "Under emergency protocols, I can authorize immediate action to prevent imminent threat to American civilians. Captain Thorne, you are authorized to engage contact too." The silence that followed was profound enough that Webb could hear his own heartbeat. He just made a decision that could either save millions of lives or trigger the very catastrophe they were trying to prevent. Either way, the responsibility was his alone. "Copy that, Control," Raven finally responded. "Engaging contact too." On Mueller's display, Nephilim banked sharply toward the northwest, her impossible engines pushing her through the thin air at speeds that compressed distance into irrelevance. Webb watched the range numbers count down, 400 miles, 300, 200, as Raven closed on a target that might be the key to saving the entire West Coast. Or the trigger that would destroy it. "Prometheus 2 away," came Raven's voice. "Time of flight 2 minutes 48 seconds. Webb gripped the railing again, watching death race across the digital ocean towards 60 more people who would never see it coming. He'd given the order, accepted the responsibility, and now all he could do was wait to discover whether he'd saved millions of lives or ended them. 1 minute to impact, Raven reported. Target is still ascending, no indication they've detected incoming ordnance. 60 seconds to find out whether Colonel Marcus Webb would be remembered as a hero, or the man who triggered nuclear annihilation on American soil. The impact registered on Mueller's displays as a brief flare of light and heat, followed by the scattered thermal signatures of debris sinking toward the ocean floor. But this time, instead of the clean kill they'd achieved with the first submarine, additional signals began appearing on the tactical display, electromagnetic bursts that painted the digital ocean in patterns of invisible communication. "Multiple transmission sources activating," Raven reported, her voice carrying the first hint of tension Webb had heard. "Looks like the command vessel got a message out before impact." Webb's stomach dropped toward his boots. The command submarine had managed to transmit final orders before Raven's missile found its target. Whether those orders called for abort or immediate detonation, they'd soon find out. "Detecting rapid ascent from remaining contacts," Mueller announced, studying readouts that updated faster than human eyes could follow. "Both submarines are moving towards surface depth." Park was coordinating frantically with multiple channels, her voice carrying the controlled urgency of someone trying to prevent global catastrophe through sheer force of will. "SDRATCOM confirms no friendly assets in either target zone. Coast Guard is evacuating civilian vessels from projected blast radius." Webb felt the weight of command settling around him like a burial shroud. His decision to authorize engagement had triggered exactly the scenario they'd hoped to avoid. The remaining submarines were preparing to surface and detonate their weapons. In approximately 10 minutes, nuclear fire would bloom above the Pacific, sending radioactive winds toward Seattle and Los Angeles. "Nephilim to Control," Raven's voice cut through the controlled chaos. "Request permission to engage remaining targets simultaneously." "Simultaneously?" Webb asked. "How is that possible?" "Nephilim carries multiple Prometheus missiles. I can achieve target lock on both submarines and fire sequentially with less than 3 seconds between launches. If I time it correctly, both weapons will impact within seconds of each other." The mathematics were simple, but the execution would require precision that pushed human capability beyond normal limits. Two targets, hundreds of miles apart, ascending through different thermal layers with varying speeds and trajectories. Miss either shot, and nuclear weapons would detonate within sight of major American cities. "What's the probability of success?" Park asked. The pause before Raven answered told Webb everything he needed to know about the difficulty of what she was proposing. With conventional targeting systems, approximately 30%, with neural interface and quantum-assisted computation, another pause, 78%. Still better than even odds, but not by much, and the consequences of failure were too catastrophic to contemplate. "There's another option," Dr. Mueller said quietly. "If Captain Thorne can get close enough to use conventional weapons instead of long-range missiles, the probability of success increases significantly." "How close?" Webb asked. "Close enough to use the aircraft's cannon, range approximately 2 miles. Webb felt his blood pressure spike. 2 miles meant flying directly over nuclear submarines that were preparing to detonate their weapons. If Raven's timing was off by even seconds, she'd be vaporized along with her impossible aircraft. "That's suicide," Park protested. "No," Raven's voice carried an odd note of satisfaction. "That's what I was built for." Through the speakers, they could hear the subtle changes in Nephilim's engine note as Raven pushed the aircraft toward its performance limits. On Mueller's display, the tactical situation was evolving rapidly. Both remaining submarines approaching surface depth, Nephilim diving toward the ocean at speeds that blurred the line between flight and controlled falling. "Beginning attack run on Contact 3, Raven announced. "Range 12 miles and closing. Target is at periscope depth and appears to be preparing for surface breach." Webb realized he was holding his breath again. Somewhere over the Pacific, a woman who'd already been declared dead was diving toward nuclear fire in an aircraft that officially didn't exist, betting her life that she could kill 2 submarines before they could end millions of others. The next few minutes would determine whether the western United States survived the night, or whether history would remember this as the day the unthinkable finally happened. "Range 6 miles, Raven reported, her voice carrying the focused calm of someone who'd found clarity in the space between life and death. "Target is beginning surface breach. I can see the conning tower." The tactical display showed Nephilim's icon diving toward the ocean at an angle that would have been impossible for any conventional aircraft. Webb realized he was watching someone commit to a course of action that offered only 2 outcomes: complete success or spectacular death. "Range 4 miles. Target is fully surfaced. I can see personnel on deck." Personnel on deck meant the submarine crew was preparing for manual detonation procedures. Whatever automated systems they'd relied on had apparently failed, forcing